Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the podcast all about the delicate balance between people and business, and quite literally reconnecting the two. My name is Tracy Rubin, and I've spent nearly my entire professional career in HR. Join me as I share stories, opinions, and words of advice with you each week. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another week. I have a short, quick episode for you this week because, as I mentioned last week, I am moving. And that means that right now I am recording basically sitting on the floor between boxes and packed up things. And, I think it is totally okay to give you an abridged episode this week. Before I even talk about anything remotely close to HR, I want to talk about Beyoncé and her new single because, if you've been around the block with me already, it's been 2 years just about that I've released this podcast or that I've been doing this podcast. And, if you have been listening, you know that I am a super fan, a stan, a Beehive member. I love Beyoncé. My bridal shower was themed Beyoncé. My bachelorette was themed Beyoncé in so many ways. And so this is a new dawn, a new era. And I am just elated. And I even made a TikTok and a reel where I'm like not singing, but, lip singing to the song. And that's big. That's major. I will only do that for the queen. And so I bring Beyoncé up because actually her song has become the anthem for the Great Resignation, evidently. I am seeing all over social media, everyone is saying, Beyoncé told me to release my job, and that is what I'm going to do. And I'm also seeing a lot of stuff on social media where people are saying, well, Beyoncé needs to remember that there is a third shift of workers out there, and she's talking about 9 to 5, but what about those of us who are coming in overnight? Like, let's put some attention on that. And so it's just really funny to live in this new era of Beyoncé with all of the 90s vibes and so much to look forward to with her new album coming out on July 29th. Mark your calendars. Obviously I'm, having a little bit of fun here talking about Beyoncé on my podcast, which has nothing to do with music, entertainment, or anything like that. But I do think it's interesting that here we have what I would say the world's best, greatest, most well-known artist of our time talking about, that work is what keeps her up at night. And this is like the way that she's being treated. Obviously, she's not talking about herself, but in this frame of reference of being like a 9 to 5 employee and like just needing to have a new way of life, a new way of living, that it's so clear that we are in we meaning our society, that we are in a moment of change. And we've been living through moments of change for the last really 2 years, at least at this point. And that people want more. They want a new way of like living, and that the things that formerly would have held them down they're not going to tear us down anymore. It's, you can't break my soul. This is almost like a close reading of the lyrics. But, whether or not you're a Beyoncé fan, I think what is really cool is that we have the world's biggest artist, performer, musician talking about the way that work has changed and the way that people view work differently, and that it's not everything anymore. It's not the way that it was perceived in the past. And I just think that's really cool. And we need to take a moment to reflect on that because that's pretty major. And I recently read, it might have been on CNN or Bloomberg, I can't remember where, but I read recently that not only is this the anthem for the Great Resignation, but that there is a clear awareness now by people who probably would not have been aware of the trials and tribulations for like the majority of Americans, at least. There's an awareness now into what work has been like and what the Great Resignation has been like. And I think that's really cool. Like, think about Beyoncé going into the recording studio. She has these lyrics, which she did is a contributor as a writer for the song. And, they all went in, all the writers for this song went in to the studio with these lyrics, and they were like, this is going to speak to people because we are aware that this is the way that people have been feeling. People have been feeling broken down, beat up, and like totally, in this space of needing to redefine and refine who they are and what they do. And I think that's really cool. And if at any point someone within 1 degree of separation from Beyonce hears this episode, please tell her how I feel about her. I feel like I need to probably, not pass like 6 minutes of talking about Beyonce in this way, because, I don't want anyone to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't sign up for a Beyonce podcast. But at the same time, you kind of did, because you've got me. I'm your host. She is actually such an impactful person on my life. I feel like such a nerd talking about this. I'm coming up on the 6 minute mark, so I promise I'll stop in a moment. But I just love the idea that Beyonce and her team and everyone that wrote this song thought about the majority of Americans who had gone through this moment of renaissance, which, by the way, is the title of her album coming out on the 29th of July, which at this point is, something that I'm eagerly counting down the days to. So I bring that up because, we're speaking a lot. And when I say we, I guess it's all of us in HR, people in this space, in the industry. There's a lot of conversation about, well, is the Great Resignation over? Is it slowing down? Are hourly employees, especially, is the market different for them? Are their needs being met? All of these conversations, right? And I think I wanted to join this episode today to talk about how the Great Resignation is not over, because there are still an incredible number of job openings and still not a whole lot of interest in filling those roles. And I recently was speaking with someone about how I think we all kind of assumed that with inflation or with the end of the additional unemployment benefits, that people would return to work in that same way that they did previous to or prior to COVID. And they're not. People have more access to jobs because of remote work. People have redefined and revised the way they want to work, who they want to be, what they want to do. It's a renaissance. That's exactly, Beyonce is right. It's a renaissance. We're in a renaissance. And I think that's such a really, really cool way of thinking about the way of work today. Because when you think about even the renaissance, like the true renaissance from back in the day, that is when all of this change came about, when art and entertainment and music and the way that people lived and worked, all of that changed. People were living, from what I can imagine, their best lives and just really like creating a life that was completely different than what life had been known to be before the Renaissance. I think that's really cool to think about where we are today in society as either being on the cusp of or in the middle of a renaissance, our own renaissance. So that's pretty cool. I think the other point here is that I recently was speaking with someone and we were talking about individuals who are working jobs that are, a little bit less desirable. Maybe they pay less. Maybe they're more of those labor-based jobs, blue-collar jobs, right? When I say less desirable, it's not that it's something that people don't want to do. It's that they're jobs that either are paying less because they don't require education or certain skills, or are entry-level jobs, or truly in like a blue-collar industry that maybe are a little bit more labor-intensive, a little bit less desirable from an hours perspective and when you work. Like there are so many things that we can attribute to this concept, right? So it's not to say that less desirable because people don't aspire to be in those jobs. It's more about what the job demands, and that can be undesirable for some people. And so you think about let's say like a tech in a hospital. They undergo a lot of stress. They have a lot of pressure. They're dealing with patients that could potentially be very sick, right? Like there are so many demands in jobs like that. Same with hospitality workers, like being a waiter or a waitress or a host or a busboy or a bus person, maybe I should say. it's not easy because you have the demands of the business and also the demands and sometimes the insane expectations of the people that you're serving. It can be stressful to choose the perfect swag to order for your company, especially when trying to find items that people will actually want to keep. And that is why I'm thrilled to tell you about swag.com. Swag.com makes picking out corporate gifts simple and fun. And you guys know I talk about it every time swag.com sponsors one of my episodes, that I love it. I love to receive swag from my company, and they're really great to partner with. And I think the best part about all of this is that if you are a remote team, even if you're not a remote team, you don't have to house anything. You can just use swag.com's warehousing, and it makes things really, really simple. And we love that. We love to be able to delegate some things, that, especially things that can take up a ton of time, like ordering and delivering gifts and swag to employees, right? So it's so nice to be able to delegate to swag.com and know that they're always going to do a good job. Swag.com makes it their business to offer a wide range of products, and that is why there's something for everyone. They carry premium brands like the North Face, Camelback, Ray-Ban, and more, all customizable with your company's logo or artwork. You can even create custom swag boxes full of great branded items, all delivered in a unique box designed for your company. And with swag.com, you can easily set up a corporate gifting program for your team with no platform fees. Their team of expert curators are standing by to help you design the perfect gifts for your team. Go to swag.com today for the perfect swag and custom gifts for your company. Right now, I have a special offer for you to help you get started, and that is 10% off your order, but only when you go to swag.com/humanhr and enter promo code HUMANHR10. Remember, for 10% off, go to swag.com/humanhr and use promo code HUMANHR10. Or servicing. And all of those jobs are considered now like much less desirable because of the way that people have been treated. We see it all the time in the news, right? That someone's throwing something at someone else, someone's fighting with a flight attendant, whatever it is. And in most cases, people are not really feeling like they're getting paid enough to deal with all of that nonsense, right? So that is the perspective that I'm taking when I say that. So I say it loosely, but please know I'm not looking to diminish the work that those individuals are doing, because they're very important to the way that our society works and interacts with all of us, right? So in that perspective, we were talking about how those individuals, like, how do you engage them? How do you keep them happy in their jobs when they have so many external forces that can really make the job difficult, like way more difficult than what just the job requirements put pressure on. So I was saying that, sometimes with those roles, I would think that giving them the ability to take time off could be one of the best ways that you engage them. But the challenge there is that, and then this is obviously aside from, decent pay, livable wage, and all those things, and benefits and everything else, but how do you actually drive employee experience for those individuals? And I'm like, thinking, well, maybe it is PTO so that they can take time away and not just always work in this state of being burnt out. But what we were sharing is that the challenge is that these individuals are often working jobs that are short-staffed. And because of this like lack of interest from people wanting to put themselves through those difficult scenarios that I had already discussed, just a moment ago. So you have people who are working these jobs that are already super pressured and burnt out, probably, maybe even underpaid, underrepresented and appreciated, right? And then you have open positions for those same jobs and they're not being filled. So how do you staff the jobs to give people the time that they need, to time off, the space that they need, to relieve the pressure, whatever it is that staffing constraint is creating a challenge with? How do you solve that problem when there are people in the world, in society today, who don't necessarily want to do those jobs? And this, I think, is going to remain the challenge in this labor market, is that we have individuals who want to work jobs that are flexible, that pay really well, that offer great benefits, that give them a great experience, where they don't feel stressed all the time, where they have time off to take, and where they can step away and have that balance. And yet there are businesses within, or I should say jobs within different businesses and industries that don't necessarily have that structure today to give people that, to enable that for individuals. So it's such a challenge. Like, how do you keep those people engaged? How do you attract new talent? And how do you retain that talent? And one of the things that it makes me think of is the idea of hiring minors and high schoolers and college students. How do you give them the exposure and the experience to work while also allowing your more experienced employees to take the time that they need? Like, what is this bubble going to look like? I know I'm kind of ranting here, but it's really something that I've been grappling with. Like, how do we solve this problem? And so I do think that eventually businesses will need to look toward younger employees more often, like who will work on a part-time basis, who want to gain the experience. And when I say younger, this is not from an ageism perspective. This is like, who is going to work the entry-level job and be happy with it? It's the person who doesn't necessarily have experience, who's trying to get their feet in the door, and who just wants to, build their resume and get that exposure. And sometimes that's someone who is in college or who's in high school looking to get that work experience, or someone who's just moved to the United States, for example, and needs to get a job. And so this makes me even think about our immigration policies and laws throughout the country. Like, how can we affect change there so that the labor market becomes more viable? Like, where we are today is not going to work. People are going to get so burnt out by these staffing shortages that it's going to only create more staffing shortages, because people are going to have to leave the workforce in order to have a sabbatical or take time off or, reinvigorate their passions, right? So I think this is all going to, when I say this challenge is going to really put pressure on the legislation and the policies that exist today to enable more people to enter the workforce, because there's definitely almost like a barrier to entry there, whether it's an immigration barrier or a barrier because of age. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I'm kind of just theorizing here. The other thing is that people who are retired, I think what I've seen, at least in what I've read, is that because of inflation, a lot of people are coming out of retirement and working more often. And so how can we give those retirees access to jobs that they are qualified for, overqualified for, while also giving them flexibility to maybe not work a full-time schedule? Like, I think that there's going to have to be this appreciation that people may want to work a lot, they may want to work a little bit, and we have to just make room for that, because we can't keep applying the same solution to these problems, right? So I don't know. These are my theories. Beyoncé has obviously really made me philosophize this challenge and really think a little bit differently. Like, again, there's so much awareness into the challenges of the workforce and labor today that Beyoncé and her team wrote a song about it, basically. It's a little bit more than that, obviously, but the premise of this song is like exactly what everyone's been saying these last 2 years. So I really think with that level of awareness, with everyone singing this song, release your job, release the stress, like that is going to create or bring awareness to this, again, this moment of renaissance and the way in which work and labor and the workforce will continue to change. I know I talk about this a lot, but I would just love if all of us just walked away from this episode and really thought differently. How is the workforce going to change? How can we affect that change? How can our politicians enable more people to enter the workforce so that we have more opportunity to hire more people, regardless of skill set? And actually, I think the other point here that I kind of want to close with is that people are going to have to invest more in training, because we are going to have to, again, expand the workforce, expand our reach. And that may mean that you're hiring unskilled workers, meaning people who might not have a specific education for the role. They might not have a specific experience for the role. They might not even have the specific skill set. But if they have the drive, if they have the values that the organization, really wants to see in each employee, if they have the motivation and the interest in learning, that's what's going to matter. And so businesses are going to have to train those people to do the job. And they should be doing that anyway, but I think it's going to create even more of an emphasis on that learning and development function. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope that, I'm not just speaking into a void here, and that all of you kind of walk away from this episode thinking differently and feeling a little bit inspired maybe to think about how we can affect that change ourselves. I think that we all, again, I always say this, that in business, everyone contributes to the culture. Well, we also all contribute to the culture of our society and how we function within it. So I hope that we can all leave this episode contributing a little bit more, challenging the status quo a little bit more, and thinking a little bit differently. With that said, Beyoncé or Beyoncé's team, if anyone hears this, please just invite me out. Let's get dinner. You don't even have to come on the podcast. Just give me like 5 minutes to express my absolute dedication to the queen. Anyway, I should really stop making this a testimonial toward my fandom. But, I think that at this point you all have appreciated, or at least can appreciate, who I am, and that you're always going to get the real deal from me. Listen, I appreciate you being here. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. By the time this episode comes out, I will be in the Midwest. And if you follow me on Instagram, again, that's HR Tracy with an I, then connect with me. Let me know your thoughts about this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Sometimes I like to do something fun and a little unfiltered and unscripted. So hope you appreciate that. Let's connect. Reach out if you have a topic suggestion or if you have a question. You can always find me in my DMs on Instagram or by email at podcast@hrtracy.com. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you next week.